What if Saturn's rings were made of advanced machines, not ice and rock? Picture this. You're floating in the vast emptiness of space, 746 million miles from Earth, approaching one of the most breathtaking sights in our solar system. Saturn emerges before you like a golden jewel. But it's not the planet itself that stops you cold, it's those rings. Those impossibly perfect, impossibly thin rings that circle the giant planet like the rim of a cosmic record player. For centuries, we've told ourselves a comforting story about those rings. They're made of ice and rock, we say, debris from shattered moons, cosmic leftovers from the birth of our solar system. But what if we've been looking at this all wrong? What if Saturn's rings aren't natural at all? What if they're the most sophisticated piece of alien technology our species has ever encountered, hiding in plain sight for over 400 years? I'm your host, and welcome to another episode of Javis Heist, where we dive deep into the mysteries that keep scientists awake at night and challenge everything we think we know about our universe. Today, we're going to explore a theory so provocative, so mind-bending, that it's been quietly whispered about in the corridors of NASA, debated in the back rooms of astronomy conferences, and dismissed by mainstream science as impossible. But is it really? Let me take you back to a cold night in 1610, in a small workshop in Padua, Italy. Galileo Galilei, you know the name, is hunched over his revolutionary telescope, the same instrument that would later get him in trouble with the Catholic Church for proving that Earth wasn't the center of everything. He's scanning the night sky when something catches his eye, a strange, bright object that doesn't behave like the other wandering stars, the planets. As he adjusts his crude lenses, trying to bring the object into focus, he sees something that defies explanation. It looks like Saturn has ears, two perfect handles extending from either side of the planet. Galileo, being a man of science, knows this is impossible. Planets don't have handles. But there it is, night after night, unchanged, perfectly symmetrical. He writes in his journal, describing Saturn as a three-bodied planet, convinced he's discovered something unprecedented in the heavens. What Galileo couldn't have known, what no one could have known for another 45 years, was that he was looking at the first documented observation of Saturn's ring system. The resolution of his telescope wasn't powerful enough to see the rings as separate from the planet, so they appeared as mysterious projections, like cosmic ears on a celestial head. Fast forward to 1659. Dutch astronomer Christian Huygens, working with a much more powerful telescope, finally solves Galileo's puzzle. Those mysterious ears are actually a thin, flat ring that completely encircles Saturn, tilted at an angle so that sometimes we see it edge on from Earth, which is why it seemed to disappear and reappear over the decades. But here's where our story really begins, because Huygens' discovery raised more questions than it answered. How does a ring that thin, we're talking about something that's 175,000 miles wide, but only about 30 feet thick in some places? How does something that impossibly delicate maintain its structure over millions of years? Think about it this way. If Earth were the size of a basketball, Saturn's rings would be thinner than a sheet of paper. Yet they maintain their perfect circular formation, their distinct gaps, their precise divisions, decade after decade, century after century. The mainstream scientific explanation emerged in the late 1800 seconds when Scottish physicist James Clerk Maxwell the same genius who gave us the equations describing electromagnetic fields, proved mathematically that the rings couldn't be solid. They had to be made of countless individual particles, each one orbiting Saturn independently, held in place by the planet's gravity and the complex gravitational interactions between the particles themselves. For over a century, this explanation satisfied most scientists. The rings were debris fields, cosmic rubble from destroyed moons or leftover material from Saturn's formation 4.6 billion years ago. Case closed. But then, we started getting closer looks. The 1st of September, 1979. NASA's Voyager 1 spacecraft begins its flyby of Saturn, and suddenly, everything we thought we knew about those rings started falling apart. The images coming back to Earth were stunning, but they were also deeply disturbing to planetary scientists. Instead of the relatively simple ring system they expected, Voyager revealed something far more complex, far more intricate, and far more organized than random debris had any right to be. The rings weren't just rings. They were thousands upon thousands of individual ringlets, each one perfectly circular, each one maintaining its own distinct orbital path. There were gaps where no particles existed at all. Not just the large Cassini division that telescopes had revealed from Earth, but hundreds of smaller gaps, each one precisely maintained. Even stranger were what NASA started calling spokes, dark radial features that rotated with Saturn's magnetic field rather than following orbital mechanics. These spokes would appear and disappear in patterns that seemed to defy the laws of physics as we understood them. Then there were the shepherd moons, small satellites that seemed to be actively herding ring particles, keeping them in line like cosmic border collies. These moons were maintaining the sharp edges of some rings and creating gaps in others with a precision that made even veteran scientists uncomfortable. Dr. Bradford Smith, the lead imaging scientist for the Voyager mission, said something in a press conference that stuck with me. It's as if we're looking at a machine of incomprehensible complexity, operating according to rules we don't understand. A machine. That word keeps coming up in the scientific literature about Saturn's rings, and it's not an accident. Let me paint you a picture of just how precise these rings are, because precision like this doesn't happen by accident in nature, at least not according to what we understand about chaos theory and orbital mechanics. The Cassini division, that major gap in Saturn's rings, is maintained by gravitational resonance with the moon Mimas. Every time a particle in that gap completes 2 orbits, Mimas completes exactly 1. This 2-to-1 resonance creates a gravitational kick that ejects particles from the gap, keeping it clear. That's elegant. That makes sense. But here's what doesn't make sense. There are hundreds of these gaps, maintained by resonances with various moons, and they're all perfectly stable over timescales that should see them disrupted by the countless gravitational influences in the Saturn system. The F-ring is even stranger. It's kept in a narrow band by 2 shepherd moons, Prometheus and Pandora, which orbit on either side of it. But here's the thing, computer models show that this configuration should be unstable. The shepherd moons should either drift away or crash into the ring material within a few million years at most. Yet there it is, apparently stable for hundreds of millions of years. Then there's the hexagonal storm at Saturn's North Pole. Yes, you heard that right. A perfectly hexagonal weather pattern that's been maintaining its shape for decades. 6-sided storms don't exist in nature. Circular storms? Sure. Oval storms? Absolutely. But geometric storms with straight edges and perfect angles? That's not weather. That's engineering. When the Cassini mission arrived at Saturn in 2004, equipped with instruments far more sophisticated than anything Voyager carried, the mysteries only deepened. Cassini's radio occultation experiments, where the spacecraft passed behind the rings and measured how radio signals were affected, revealed internal structures that shouldn't exist. The rings have vertical corrugations, like the surface of a washboard, that extend for thousands of miles. These corrugations all point toward the same region of space, suggesting they were all created by the same event. But what event could create identical patterns across hundreds of thousands of miles of ring material? And why haven't these patterns been smoothed out by countless particle collisions over millions of years? The composition data was equally troubling. While the rings are indeed mostly water ice, as expected, they also contain organic compounds, complex carbon-based molecules that have no business existing in the radiation-blasted environment of Saturn's magnetosphere. These compounds should be broken down by solar radiation and charged particles within a few thousand years at most. Yet there they are, in concentrations that suggest they're being constantly replenished by some unknown process. But perhaps the most unsettling discoveries came from Cassini's magnetometer experiments. Saturn's magnetic field interacts with the ring particles in ways that create electromagnetic phenomena unlike anything else in the solar system. The spokes I mentioned earlier, they're electrostatically levitated dust particles, somehow synchronized across thousands of miles of ring material. The particles rise above the ring plane in perfect coordination, rotate with Saturn's magnetic field, then settle back down, all without any known mechanism to coordinate this behavior across such vast distances. Dr. Geraint Jones, a planetary scientist who worked on the Cassini mission, described it this way. It's as if the entire ring system is somehow aware of itself. Particles separated by thousands of miles are behaving in coordinated ways that suggest some kind of information transfer mechanism we don't understand. Information transfer, communication. These aren't words we typically associate with debris fields. The radio emissions from Saturn's rings present another puzzle. They vary in intensity and frequency in patterns that seem almost structured. Some researchers have noted that if you convert these radio emissions to audio, they sound remarkably like the kind of structured signals we might expect from an artificial source. NASA officially describes these as natural radio emissions caused by charged particle interactions, but several scientists have privately expressed doubts about that explanation. Here's where things get really interesting and really controversial. For decades, scientists assumed Saturn's rings were ancient leftovers from the formation of the solar system 4.6 billion years ago. But recent analysis of Cassini data suggests something far more disturbing. The rings appear to be young, very young, perhaps only 100 million years old, maybe less. This creates what planetary scientists call the ring paradox. If the rings are young, what created them so recently in cosmic terms? If they're the debris from a destroyed moon, why don't we see similar ring systems around the other gas giants? Jupiter has rings, but they're pathetic wisps compared to Saturn's magnificent structure. Dr. Larry Esposito, a ring researcher at the University of Colorado, has suggested that Saturn's rings might be in a constant state of renewal, that new ring material is somehow being created to replace material that's constantly being lost to Saturn's atmosphere. But here's the question that keeps me up at night. What mechanism could be creating new ring material? And more importantly, What could be controlling that process with the precision necessary to maintain the ring system's incredibly complex structure? Now, I want to be clear about something. What I'm about to discuss isn't accepted by mainstream science. These are theories that exist on the fringes, whispered about in graduate student lounges, and debated in online forums by researchers who are too afraid of career suicide to publish their ideas in peer-reviewed journals. But these theories exist for a reason, and they deserve to be heard. The most radical theory suggests that Saturn's rings are actually a form of von Neumann probe, a self-replicating machine designed by an advanced extraterrestrial civilization. According to this theory, the ice particles in Saturn's rings are actually microscopic machines, each one capable of reproduction and communication with its neighbors. This would explain the rings' impossible precision, their apparent ability to self-repair, and their coordinated behavior across vast distances. It would also explain why the rings appear young. They're not debris at all, but rather a manufacturing system that's been in operation for a relatively short time in cosmic terms. The organic compounds in the rings, raw materials for the manufacturing process, the electromagnetic anomalies, communication signals between individual units. The perfect mathematical relationships between ring gaps and moon orbits, intentional design to camouflage the true nature of the system. Sound crazy? Maybe. But consider this. If an advanced civilization wanted to establish a presence in our solar system, what better place to hide than in a structure we've been observing for 400 years and have already explained away as natural phenomena? There's another piece of this puzzle that doesn't get talked about much, but it's been bothering researchers for years. Saturn's rings emit more infrared radiation than they should, based on their distance from the Sun. In simple terms, they're warmer than they ought to be. The standard explanation is that this excess heat comes from gravitational energy. The constant collision and interaction of ring particles converts motion into heat. But detailed calculations suggest that this mechanism can't account for all the observed radiation. Where's the extra heat coming from? In 2017, a team of researchers at the European Southern Observatory published a paper suggesting that some regions of Saturn's rings show temperature variations that appear to be pulsed. Regular increases and decreases in heat output that follow patterns too regular to be explained by random particle interactions. The paper was quietly withdrawn 6 months after publication, with no official explanation from the journal or the research team. On the 15th of September, 2017, the Cassini spacecraft was deliberately crashed into Saturn's atmosphere, ending one of the most successful planetary missions in history. Officially, this was done to prevent any possibility of the spacecraft contaminating Saturn's moons, particularly Enceladus, which might harbor life. But some researchers have suggested a different motive. In its final months, Cassini was making increasingly close passes through Saturn's rings, gathering detailed compositional and structural data that had never been possible before. What if Cassini discovered something in those final passes that was so significant, so potentially disturbing, that the decision was made to destroy the spacecraft rather than risk the data falling into the wrong hands? I know how that sounds. I know how conspiracy-minded it appears. But consider the timing. Cassini was healthy, functioning perfectly, and could have continued operating for several more years. The decision to crash it seemed sudden and wasn't fully explained to the public. Several former NASA employees have hinted that the final months of data from Cassini contained anomalous readings that were classified at levels higher than typical scientific data. But these are just rumors, whispers from people who signed non-disclosure agreements and can't speak openly about what they saw. Even without Cassini, ground-based observations continue to reveal new mysteries about Saturn's rings. Advanced adaptive optics systems on Earth-based telescopes now rival the resolution of space-based instruments, and what they're seeing doesn't make sense within our current understanding of planetary ring systems. The ring structure is changing, but not in the chaotic way we'd expect from random processes. New gaps appear and disappear in patterns that seem almost purposeful. Ring particles are being redistributed in ways that maintain the overall structure's stability even as individual components change. It's like watching a city rebuild itself, maintaining its basic layout while constantly renovating individual buildings. Radio telescopes have detected structured signals from the Saturn system that don't match any known natural phenomena. These signals are weak, intermittent, and buried in noise, but their mathematical properties are unsettling. They show evidence of error correction, redundancy, and other characteristics we associate with engineered communication systems. Most of this data exists in technical papers that few people read, buried in the jargon of radio astronomy and planetary science. But it's there, building a case that mainstream science seems reluctant to acknowledge. Let's assume for a moment that the radical theory is correct. Let's assume that Saturn's rings are actually an alien megastructure, a piece of technology beyond our current understanding, masquerading as a natural phenomenon. What would that mean for us? For our understanding of our place in the universe? First, it would mean we're not alone. Obviously. But more than that, it would mean that advanced civilizations have been operating in our solar system for who knows how long, and we've been completely oblivious to their presence. It would mean that our solar system isn't the quiet, empty place we thought it was. It's inhabited, just not by anything we can recognize as life. The technology represented by Saturn's rings, if that's what they are, would be centuries or millennia ahead of anything we can currently imagine. We're talking about machines the size of particles that can communicate, reproduce, and coordinate their behavior across distances that would make our best communications networks look primitive. But here's the really unsettling part. If this theory is correct, then these machines have been watching us since we first turned telescopes towards Saturn. They've observed the entire development of human technology, from Galileo's crude lenses to our modern space probes. They know we're here. The question is, what do they want? If there's even a grain of truth to these theories, why aren't we hearing about it from official sources? Why isn't NASA holding press conferences about the possibility of alien technology in our solar system? The answer might be simpler than you think: institutional inertia and career preservation. Consider what would happen if a planetary scientist published a paper seriously suggesting that Saturn's rings might be artificial. Their career would be over. Funding would dry up. They'd be labeled a crank and excluded from future missions. The scientific establishment has invested centuries of research and reputation in the natural explanation for Saturn's rings. To suggest otherwise isn't just scientifically controversial, it's professionally suicidal. But beyond career concerns, there might be deeper reasons for secrecy. If Saturn's rings are indeed artificial, that knowledge could have profound implications for human society. It could trigger everything from religious crises to mass panic, to a fundamental reshuffling of global power structures. Maybe the truth is being suppressed, not out of malice, but out of a genuine belief that humanity isn't ready for it. Now, I want to be fair here. There are conventional explanations for all of these anomalies, explanations that don't require invoking alien technology. The precision of the ring structure could be explained by resonances and gravitational interactions that we simply don't fully understand yet. Planetary dynamics is incredibly complex, and we're constantly discovering new phenomena that challenge our models. The electromagnetic anomalies might be natural processes that we haven't encountered elsewhere in the solar system, simply because Saturn's ring system is unique in its scale and complexity. The temperature anomalies could result from previously unknown energy sources within the rings themselves, perhaps radioactive decay from primordial materials or chemical reactions we haven't identified. The coordinated behavior of ring particles might be explainable through chaos theory and emergent complexity, the same mathematical principles that allow flocks of birds to move as coordinated units without any central control. These are all reasonable scientific explanations that don't require us to invoke extraterrestrial intelligence. But here's what bothers me. These conventional explanations require us to believe in an awful lot of coincidences. They ask us to accept that Saturn's rings just happen to be perfectly maintained by natural processes that just happen to create the appearance of artificial design, monitored by instruments that just happen to malfunction in ways that create the appearance of structured signals. At what point do we have too many coincidences? I've been researching this topic for months now, diving deep into scientific papers, talking to researchers who are willing to speak off the record, trying to separate facts from speculation and genuine mystery from wishful thinking. And I have to tell you, I'm conflicted. The rational part of my brain, the part that was trained in scientific skepticism and critical thinking, keeps reminding me that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And while there's certainly evidence of anomalies in Saturn's rings, there's no smoking gun, no undeniable proof of artificial origin. But the part of me that wonders, the part that looks up at Saturn through a telescope and marvels at those impossibly perfect rings, that part can't shake the feeling that we're missing something huge. Maybe it's just human nature to see patterns where none exist, to attribute intention to random processes, to believe that we're special enough to be worth watching by advanced alien civilizations. Or maybe we're looking at the greatest discovery in human history, and we're too afraid to acknowledge it. The truth is, I don't know. None of us do. And that's what makes this mystery so compelling and so frustrating at the same time. The investigation into Saturn's rings continues. New missions are being planned, new instruments are being developed, and new analytical techniques are being applied to existing data. The European Space Agency's proposed Saturn Ring Observer mission would study the rings with unprecedented detail, using advanced spectrometers and particle analyzers to determine their exact composition and structure. But funding for the mission remains uncertain, and some critics argue that we already know everything we need to know about planetary rings. Meanwhile, artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms are being applied to years of archived data from Cassini and other missions, looking for patterns that human researchers might have missed. Some of these analyses have revealed correlations and structures in the data that are difficult to explain through conventional models. Ground-based radio telescope arrays like the Very Large Array are conducting systematic monitoring of radio emissions from the Saturn system, building detailed databases of signal characteristics over time. While the results haven't been made public, researchers familiar with the project describe the findings as intriguing and unexpected. Amateur astronomers with access to sophisticated equipment are also contributing to our understanding, High-resolution images and time-lapse videos of Saturn's rings reveal changes and phenomena that aren't always captured by professional observatories focused on other projects. All of this research continues to add to our knowledge, but it also continues to raise new questions. It's part of a broader pattern of anomalous observations throughout our solar system that challenge our understanding of planetary science. There's the hexagonal storm on Saturn, which I mentioned earlier. There's the anomalous acceleration of the Pioneer spacecraft as they left the solar system, a tiny but persistent force that pushed them slightly off course in ways that can't be explained by known physics. There are the mysterious radio bursts from Jupiter that seem to carry structured information. There are the geometric patterns in the Martian polar ice caps that look disturbingly artificial. There are the unexplained heat sources in the outer solar system that suggest unknown energy sources. Individually, each of these anomalies can be explained away, dismissed as measurement errors or misunderstood natural phenomena. But taken together, they paint a picture of a solar system that's far stranger and more complex than we've been taught to believe. Maybe Saturn's rings are just the most obvious example of something we're not ready to accept, that intelligence, artificial or otherwise, might be far more common in the universe than we've assumed. If Saturn's rings are indeed artificial, the technology they represent would revolutionize our understanding of physics, engineering, and materials science. We're talking about machines that operate in the hostile environment of space for millions of years without breaking down. We're talking about communication systems that can coordinate behavior across hundreds of thousands of miles instantaneously. We're talking about manufacturing processes that can create complex structures from basic raw materials using only energy from the Sun and Saturn's magnetic field. The applications for human technology would be limitless. Energy generation, materials manufacturing, space colonization, even artificial intelligence could be transformed if we could understand and reverse engineer ring technology. But that's assuming we could understand it at all. The gap between our current technology and ring technology, if it exists, might be so vast that it would be like trying to explain quantum mechanics to a medieval blacksmith. Still, the potential is tantalizing. And maybe that's part of the reason why this topic generates so much controversy. The stakes are too high, and the implications too profound, for the scientific community to approach it with complete objectivity. Beyond the scientific and technological implications, the possibility of artificial rings around Saturn raises fundamental questions about consciousness, intelligence, and our place in the cosmic order. If the rings are artificial, what kind of intelligence created them? Are we looking at the product of biological evolution like ourselves, or something else entirely, perhaps artificial intelligence that evolved beyond its biological creators? And what is the purpose of such a structure? Is it purely functional, perhaps a data processing system or energy collection array? Or does it serve some purpose we can't imagine, operating according to motivations and goals that are completely alien to human experience? The rings have been stable for at least the 400 years we've been observing them, and possibly for millions of years before that. What kind of planning and engineering would be required to build something designed to operate on those timescales? These questions force us to confront the possibility that intelligence, even intelligence that surpasses our own, might not be as rare as we've assumed. And that raises uncomfortable questions about human uniqueness and significance. As we look toward the future, several developments could potentially resolve the Saturn ring mystery once and for all. Advanced space telescopes currently under development will be able to analyze the rings with unprecedented precision, potentially detecting individual particles and their behavior patterns. If the rings are indeed artificial, this level of observation might reveal the telltale signatures of manufactured structures. Quantum communication experiments on Earth might help us understand the apparent instantaneous coordination of ring particles across vast distances. If similar quantum effects are at work in the rings, we might be able to detect and decode the communication protocols being used. Artificial intelligence systems designed to analyze complex data patterns might be able to detect the signatures of artificial intelligence within the ring system itself. It's possible that intelligence can recognize intelligence even when it's radically different from our own. And of course, future space missions to Saturn could settle the question definitively. A probe that actually enters the ring system and analyzes individual particles at the atomic level would reveal their true nature within hours. But such missions are expensive and risky, and they require a level of international cooperation that's difficult to achieve when the stakes are so high and the implications so uncertain. Before we conclude, I want to address the elephant in the room, the very real possibility that I'm completely wrong about all of this. The skeptical perspective is straightforward and compelling. Saturn's rings are exactly what mainstream science says they are: a natural debris field held in orbit by gravitational forces and shaped by well-understood, if complex, orbital mechanics. The apparent precision and coordination of the ring system is an illusion created by our human tendency to see patterns and intention where none exist. The electromagnetic anomalies are just poorly understood natural phenomena that will eventually be explained by conventional physics. The temperature variations, the structured radio emissions, the seemingly coordinated particle behavior, all of it can be explained without invoking alien technology. This perspective has the advantage of not requiring us to overturn everything we think we know about planetary science, and it doesn't ask us to believe that advanced alien civilizations are operating in our solar system without making contact. It's simpler, more conservative, and probably correct. But probably correct isn't the same as definitely correct, and that's what keeps this mystery alive. So where does that leave us? After diving deep into the scientific data, the anomalous observations, the suppressed theories, and the mainstream explanations, what can we conclude about the true nature of Saturn's rings? Honestly, we can conclude that we don't know. We can't know. Not yet. What we can say is that Saturn's rings are far stranger and more complex than we initially thought. They display characteristics that challenge our understanding of planetary dynamics and force us to expand our models of what's possible in the natural world. Whether those characteristics result from unknown natural processes or from technology beyond our current comprehension, that's the question that will define one of the great mysteries of our time. But here's what I find most fascinating about this whole investigation. It's forced me to confront my own assumptions about what's possible, what's likely, and what's worth considering. 6 months ago, if someone had told me they thought Saturn's rings might be artificial, I would have dismissed them as a crank. But after months of research, after reading the technical papers and talking to the researchers and analyzing the data, I can't dismiss the possibility as easily as I once could. And maybe that's the real value of exploring these fringe theories. Not because they're necessarily correct, but because they force us to question our assumptions and consider possibilities we might otherwise ignore. The universe is under no obligation to make sense to us. It's under no obligation to conform to our models or meet our expectations, and maybe our biggest mistake is assuming that we understand more than we actually do. So, what do you think? Are Saturn's rings the beautiful natural phenomenon we've always believed them to be? Or are we looking at evidence of intelligence and technology operating on a scale we can barely imagine? I genuinely want to know your thoughts. The comments section below is for exactly this kind of discussion, and I read every single comment that gets posted. Share your theories, your skepticism, your questions, and your insights. This is the kind of mystery that benefits from multiple perspectives and diverse thinking. If you found this deep dive into one of our solar system's greatest mysteries as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We're just getting started here at Javis Heist, and there are so many more mysteries waiting to be explored. Next week, we're diving into another cosmic puzzle that's been hiding in plain sight for decades. The anomalous radio signals from the center of our galaxy that some researchers believe might be evidence of a vast alien communication network. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Until then, keep looking up, keep questioning, keep wondering, because in a universe as vast and strange as ours, the biggest mistake we can make is thinking we've got it all figured out. This has been another episode of Javis Heist. I'm your host, and remember, the truth is out there, but sometimes it's hiding in the most obvious places.